Okay, so welcome back. And so today we're going to make samosas. Now, yesterday I already cooked my filling for my samosa, so whether it's a meat filling or vegetarian filling, make it sort of a few hours ahead or even a day beforehand so that it has lots of time to cool before you have to stuff the samosa pastry. Now, the samosa pastry may seem complex, but it isn't. There's three easy parts to it. One is making the dough. Second is rolling out evenly, and then third is actually lightly cooking that sort of dough before you fill it and then fry it or bake it. So let's get on with it. So I've got 2 cups of all-purpose flour. To that I'm adding 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. Let's just give that bit of a mix. And then to that I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup of vegetable shortening. Let's just get that out of there. All right, let's put that aside. So just cut that right into the pastry here, or into the flour, excuse me. Now you can use your fingers if you wish. I'm kind of doing a combination of the two. And what we're going to do to this then is also add, once this sort of resembles sort of breadcrumbs, or as I've shown you before, a sort of a fist, and make with the shortening and the flour, and we'll see how that comes along. Oops, there's my clove again, part of my preservative endeavor for all of my flours and dals and etc., so that we don't get bugs in them. Okay, and nothing fancy, just break it right in like that, and that should take you a couple of minutes. And if you don't have a pastry cutter, don't worry about it, use your fingertips. I use one because my fingertips are generally warm, and that's not pastry's friend from that perspective. So that's kind of what it looks like. And just before I add the water, just to make sure I have enough, so it forms something like that and then falls apart. So that's what you really want to look for. Make a tight fist, see it forms a little bit and then falls apart. Okay, so excuse me, let's just grab 1 cup of water and add that to the mixture a little at a time. Okay, so here's my water. So we're just going to add a little bit of water at a time. It's just cold water. Let's add half of it and see how the dough comes together. And it should be a nice soft dough. Should not be hard at all. But also not too soft. Okay, so I'm going to just pull this together, so I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, I'm back. So I've got the dough, and as I say, sort of be careful when you put in the water, because in this particular case I didn't actually use all of that water. I'm just going to take a touch more of the shortening and just sort of smooth over the rest of the dough with that. And what we're now going to do is we're going to make balls from the dough. So I like to just take a bit of flour in my hand like that, just to clean off all of that sort of sticky dough. And what we're going to do is make some even dough balls, and then we're going to roll out those dough balls. So I'll be back once I finish making the little dough balls. Okay, and we're back. So I've got my dough, and as I was forming the dough, I just rolled it in some flour so they didn't sort of quite stick together. So these should be potentially the size of Timbits, maybe a bit smaller, a bit larger than that. So out of the 2 cups, I was able to make, there's 14 here, but They're not all the same size, and we're not all the same size, so don't worry about that. But they're roughly the same size. So they're slightly larger than Timbits. What you're going to do is just take them in your hand, flatten them like that, and then you're going to roll them out. So I'm going to show you how to do one, and then I'm going to do the rest, and then I'll come back. So this is, it says, I mean, this is years of chapati making experience now, getting these the right shape and getting the movement happening. Don't be disheartened if you're not able to make these as round or as quickly. Just take your time. There's no rush to this, because what we're going to do is, once we've finished rolling all of these out, we're going to take a crepe pan and very lightly cook them. And so what I'm going to do is, once I've finished rolling these dough balls out, I'll be back, and all you do simply is take it from there and just put it on a paper towel. And I'll be back. Okay, and we're back. I'm probably a bit floury, but essentially I've got my pastry rolled out into thin chapati-like discs, and what we're going to do is just lightly cook them on this griddle. So you can use a frying pan, Indians call it a tawa, or a crepe pan like I have here. And what you're then going to do is, once you've sort of got little dark spots on both sides, just take a cloth and just cover it so that your pastry stays moist, okay? Because what you don't want is for the pastry to become hard, because you are going to have to cut it in half and then make a triangular shape out of it. If you have one of those tortilla containers, certainly I think they're like kind of brown tortilla containers, you can certainly leave it in there. Just put a paper towel and just add them on there. You don't need to add anything. Okay, so this is hot. You may not want to do that. My hands are used to that. Remove any excess flour, and that's all you're going to do. So let me move this out of the way. Whoops. And bring these close. Now, if you don't have sort of, asbestos fingers like me, you can use a spatula or some type of a paddle. I don't know what you call it. Anyway, and you can start seeing that it's coming up. So I'm going to do one of these, and then I'm going to carry on doing the other the other 13, and then I'll be back once this one is done. You can sort of turn it. You can see that it's starting to brown, and you can see the little bubbles come up as well. You just essentially want the pastry so that if you are manipulating it into that triangular shape, it's not going to fall apart. So you're only very, very lightly cooking it so that it gives it a bit of structure. See little dark parts coming through. And remember, I like frying my samosas, so I'm going to be frying the samosas, so the pastry will cook at that time. So make sure you don't get the pastry to rise too much like that. So that's all I'm going to do. So keep it very light. Just some very, very light brown marks on it. And that looks about done to me. So I'm going to pull that over there, put that there, and just cover it with some cheesecloth or some other type of cloth. And I'll see you in about maybe 15 minutes. Okay, so in the next step of the samosa making process, I've lightly cooked the chapatis. See, they're still quite warm, or the pastry still quite warm. So, but once again, it has form, so it holds. What I'm going to do, so that we can get that great sort of triangular shape that samosas always are, is cut the disc in half. And what I'm going to then do also is, I've got about 3 tablespoons of flour in here. I'm going to make a little glue or a little paste with this flour, so that the wrapped samosa doesn't fall apart. So I'll be back once I've added a bit of water to this and are ready to form the samosas. Okay, so I'm back, and so I've added the water to the flour. The consistency should be sort of like a North American sort of pancake batter mixture, and if there are a few lumps, don't worry about that. Now, you can pick which side of the samosa pastry you want to sort of show, whether it's the spotted side like that, or whether it is the unspotted side. I just kind of go with what naturally flows with the pastry, and it seems that the pastry wants to go this way, so that's what I'm going to do. So what I like to do is, I am overly cautious about a samosa exploding while I'm frying it, so I like to put a fair amount of this glue on the pastry. So definitely at the tip here, because you don't want the oil to seep through there and have a really greasy samosa. So definitely there, and then I sort of put just extra right around, and then fold that over. So now you have a pocket like that, so a little cone essentially, and in that little cone, now remember, we cooked the samosa mixture, the filling, with some bay leaves. You can just take those bay leaves out, they've done their job, and then lightly pack it. So don't put too much filling in here, because that will cause it to break apart as well. I have a tablespoon measure here, so perhaps a tablespoon per samosa. And all you're then going to do is seal this, and then your samosa will be sort of ready for frying. So I'm just going to seal that on the edge. Don't worry about getting samosa mixture in your glue, because you're going to throw that out as soon as you've finished making all of the samosas. And then all you're simply doing is pressing this together. And just press it together quite firmly, right? Because you don't want to get any oil in there. And that is as simple as that is. And there's your homemade samosa pocket. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the rest of them. But what I will do is I'll make a couple, and then I'll fry them for you so you see what they look like when they're fried. And I'll be back in a minute. Okay, and we're back. So what I have heating on the side is about 2 cups of oil. It's sizzling a little bit because I actually had a bit of butter in the pan that I just reused, so not to worry about that. So, and I've got 4 samosas here, as I'm going to do the rest of them later, but I just wanted to show you how these fry up. So what you want to do is just take a bit of the pastry and throw it into the oil, and if it comes right up, you know that the oil is ready. And just remember, the filling in here has already been cooked, so all you're really doing is warming it through and cooking the pastry or the rest of the pastry. Now, just double check, make sure there's no hole here or any of the seams are open. So I'm going to pop that right in, and once again, it's bubbling up now. I'm using a small pan on purpose. I didn't want to use a lot of oil, and you know, it'll take a bit longer. You're not, you know, making 5 or 6 of these at a time. So this pot will make about 2 at a time. So I'm just going to gently slide in 2. And then I've got a handy dandy tong here, which we'll gently use to turn that. And all you're looking for now is a golden brown color from the pastry, which really shouldn't take more than 2 to 3 minutes. So, and then just don't touch them too much. Just make sure they haven't stuck to the bottom and they are sort of popping right up, and let them cook through. So I'll be back in about a minute once I see that the pastry has become a golden brown color. Okay, and so they've turned a nice sort of golden brown. Make sure they're not too dark. I like to lift them up like this because if there's any oil, it can drain nicely. And you just put them in your colander like that. I've lined my colander with a paper towel. But once again, the nice thing about these is that because of the pastry, it is not greasy at all. So if I look at my fingers, not greasy at all. So I've just popped in the other two here. So I'm going to let those sort of cook through on the pastry side. And the other reason I didn't put too much oil in here is that I have to really throw out the oil because this is a meat filling that we've got in here, so it's not an oil that I'm going to reuse. If it was a vegetable, potentially I could reuse that for some other frying that I was going to do in a short order. Now, with these samosas, you can certainly serve them with chutney, whether it's a date and amaranth chutney that you sometimes find at the restaurants, that brown one, a coriander or mint chutney. You could even serve it with a raita. And, you know, growing up, sometimes we didn't have all of those condiments. And so, you know, ketchup was our best friend. So whether it's ketchup or brown sauce or a salsa, eat it, yeah, using what's available for you from a condiment. Now the pastry here, I mean, this is quite warm still. The pastry here is really lovely. It's light, it's flaky, and it pulls apart deliciously. Look at that. That's just really nice and thin. Often when you have these store-bought samosas, you eat more pastry and more potato, I guess, than you eat the meat. But this is nice and light and thin pastry. I don't know if I'm going to attempt to even eat this because it is quite hot, but here goes. That's great. Now remember, you can actually freeze these samosas as well. So, you know, before frying, what you can do is wrap them in saran wrap or some type of a secure wrap. Space them out and put them in a freezer bag or a Ziploc container and put them away in the fridge so that when you are entertaining, what you can do is just pull them out and you know, let them thaw in the fridge or out on the counter overnight in the fridge, you know, a couple of hours on the counter because you want to make sure the inside is actually fully thawed. And then fry them up really just, you know, before your guests arrive, and then pop them in the oven so that they don't get cold. And the nice thing about this pastry, what I really love about it is you can actually hear it. So it's not one of those greasy sort of pastries that you know, sometimes people make samosas out of spring roll, and I find that pastry absorbs a lot of oil. So it's worth the effort of making this really simple pastry recipe. And I find that, look, it's a community activity, so you can get the whole family engaged. You know, somebody could be making the dough. Once the dough is made, somebody could be rolling it, somebody could be lightly cooking it, somebody could be then filling it, and then somebody could be frying it. So I know growing up, that's what we did. As a family, we'd sort of say, okay, great, because these things, people inhale samosas. You can't just eat one of them. So, so it was a family thing to do, and what better time to do it than now? So enjoy.